The auction yard was more dust than ground, and more silence than sound, except for the haggling voices that rose and fell like flies buzzing over something dying. Heat clung to the wooden beams of the platform, and the air shimmered as though even the sun was ashamed to look too closely at what was happening there. A woman stood with her head bowed, her face hidden behind a thin veil, her figure stiff and still as if she had been carved from sorrow. Men murmured, women whispered, and laughter skipped through the crowd like a cruel child playing games. Elias Boone stood at the edge of that crowd, boots worn, hat brim pulled low, and the ache of too many hungry winters still hanging about his shoulders. He had nothing much, no cattle worth naming, no silver to spare, and no pride left to polish. And yet something in him stilled when he looked at the veiled figure trembling on that platform. The auctioneer barked, his voice cracked with dust. $5 to start. Who'll make it 6? No one raised a hand. A sneer slipped across Silas Cawthorn's face, and a woman near the saloon muttered loud enough for all to hear, "Not worth the shoes on her feet." The words cut sharper than knives. The woman did not flinch, but Elias saw her fingers curl tight against her dress, as if she were holding on to something only she could feel. He did not think. His voice, rough and low, slid out before he could call it back. $1. The crowd laughed, a cruel, braying noise that filled the square. "Sold," the auctioneer said, too quickly, eager to be done with the shame of it. And so it was settled. When she was led down, Elias stepped forward, feeling shame crawl like fire under his skin. Silas shouted, "Man's got himself a $1 bride. She'll eat him out of his one-room shack by sundown." The laughter rang again, but Elias kept his eyes on the ground. The woman stood near him, still silent, her veil hiding everything except the quiet dignity of her posture. They turned together, and without words, began the long walk out of town. The road stretched wide and empty, framed by mesquite and dust, shadows stretching longer than either of them. He offered his hand once when her step faltered. She hesitated, then placed her fingers against his, light and uncertain, yet steady enough to make something stir inside him. The silence between them was not the silence of strangers. It was the silence of two people carrying too much past to spill into the dirt at once. Above them, a hawk circled, its wings spread against a vast, unforgiving sky. By the time they reached his shack, the day was near spent. His home stood crooked against the horizon, wood patched and tin rusting, more a shelter than a house. He swallowed his shame. "This ain't much," he muttered, pushing the door open. She stepped inside, touched the rough grain of the wall, as though it were something sacred. She did not turn away, did not scorn. She only said, in a voice like the rustle of leaves, "It is enough." Inside, there was little more than a cot, a broken chair, and a pot scarred black from years of use. Elias busied himself with nonsense, setting down his hat, straightening nothing that could be straightened, fumbling for words. She walked past him quietly, rolled her sleeves, and began to take stock of what little he had. Cornmeal, beans, a sliver of salt pork forgotten at the back of the shelf. With hands steady as prayer, she set to cooking. Soon, the shack filled with a smell warm enough to soften its hard edges. They ate by lamplight, silent save for the scrape of spoons. He watched her, ashamed of his hunger, yet grateful beyond words. In that quiet, the shack no longer felt like a cage, but something close to a beginning. For the first time in years, Elias thought maybe the dust could settle inside him too. But the world has a way of prying open tender places. Days later, when he brought her into town for flour and coffee, the whispers rose again like a storm. May Duggan leaned against her saloon railing, eyes sharp as knives. "There goes Boone and his $1 bride," she said loud enough to turn heads. Silas tipped his hat mockingly. "Mighty bargain, Boone. You feed her, she might last till winter." Laughter swelled. Elias's jaw tightened, fists trembling at his sides, but he kept his head low. He wanted to fight, yet he knew fists could not beat the weight of a town's cruelty. Then he felt her hand brush against his. She whispered just enough for him to hear, "Let them spend their silver on cruelty." Her voice. It was the first time he truly heard it, soft and melodic, like water over stone. The sound cut through the jeers, as though they were nothing. He looked at her, stunned, unable to speak. That night in the shack, he asked her gently to speak again. She began with a hum, low and trembling, a hymn rising and falling in the air like smoke from a forgotten fire. Elias sat still, dust tracing lines of salt down his face, his heart thudding heavy. For years, he had felt like a drifter with no home, no anchor, no voice to call his own. But listening to her, he felt rooted, as if some small piece of the earth had chosen him at last. She paused, lowered her head, and said, "You paid only $1. But you gave me back my worth." His throat closed, too full to answer. The town would not rest. At the saloon, Silas found him again, louder this time, eager to draw blood. "A man who can't afford a real woman ought to hide himself and his ghost," he spat, drink staining his breath. The crowd circled, eager for spectacle. Elias stood frozen, shame coiling tight, fists clenched but eyes lowered. He could feel the walls of laughter pressing in, ready to crush him. And then she stepped forward, her veil still on. She faced Silas and the pack of onlookers. Her voice rose steady and clear. "Shame belongs to those who laugh at the broken, not to those who stand together." The saloon grew silent. Even the piano stilled. The words hung in the air, undeniable as thunder. Slowly, she lifted her veil. Faces leaned forward, eager for mockery. Instead, they saw scars carved deep across her skin, the map of old cruelty written plain. Yet she did not lower her head. She looked at them with eyes steady as dawn, daring them to see her and still call her worthless. Elias stepped beside her then, his hand reaching for hers. They stood together in the silence, two weathered souls stitched by quiet defiance. Silas's sneer faltered. The crowd's laughter broke and scattered like glass underfoot. One by one, eyes fell away. Without another word, the two of them turned and walked out into the night, the crowd parting as though some holy wind had cut its way through. The road back to their shack was dark but lit with a thin thread of stars. He did not speak. He only felt the weight of her hand in his, and the weight was not heavy, it was steady. When they reached the shack, the horizon burned with the red-gold glow of a dying sun. Poor they remained, yet there was a richness no coin could buy. And so the tale closes not in wealth or grandeur, but in something far rarer. Sometimes worth is not counted in silver, nor dignity measured in the eyes of those who watch. Sometimes it takes only $1, a single act of quiet courage, to turn shame into sanctuary. And if you remember anything from this story, let it be this: the world may bid against your soul, but the right voice, the right hand beside you, can remind you that even the broken deserve to stand tall.